morning, folks. You are very welcome to Bandido Talks. Well, the Bandido has found himself a little perch this morning. It's the big trunk of a tree. I thought I'd just, have a little bit of relaxation time and think about a very interesting thing that we are in fact going to talk about this morning. We're going to talk about my mate Figgy. That's right, my mate Figgy. Let me lay it out for you, folks. Again, the crows are vocalizing their disapproval at this video. You're just gonna have to put up with the crows. They'll bring a little atmosphere to the recording. Good morning. This is actually a good little perch to do a video. Your dog doesn't want to be in the video, does it?
No, he's fine.
He's fine.
Come on, come on.
So my mate Figgy. Who is my mate Figgy? Well, you see, folks, about 2 years ago, in my front garden and in my back garden, 2 fig trees were planted. Now, they were planted in September 2024, and last year, a year after they were planted, they yielded a whole bunch of figs. This made the Bandido very happy. So the Bandido had a whole bunch of figs. Let's say about 7 or 8 figs per tree. And so everything looked like it was going well. The figs had been planted. It looked as if they had established themselves after a year. Because of course they delivered some figs. So these little fig trees, they looked like they had found their new home. Now of course it rolls around to this year. And I'm thinking, well, these fig trees, they really delivered last year. I had accepted that it was a foregone conclusion that they would deliver again. But here comes the turbulence in the story, folks. It turns out we are now in early May, and the fig tree in my back garden looks like it's doing just fine. The leaves have come. I can see little baby figs are growing. Give it a few months, and there will probably be 8 to 10 juicy figs waiting for the Bandido's gnashers. But the fig tree at the front of the house, well, what happened, folks? You see, one fig tree, the one in the backyard, its leaves have come. You can see that little baby figs are growing. And so I'm staring at the fig tree in the backyard and thinking, well, it's doing well. But the fig tree in the front garden, there doesn't look like there are any signs of life whatsoever. No leaves, no figs. It just looks like a little stick in the front garden. There's no greenery to be seen anywhere. So, my brother and I, we start to have suspicions because we named the fig tree in our front garden Figgy. And it looked like Figgy was in a bit of bother, because Figgy's sibling in the backyard, called Ziggy. Ziggy looked like he was doing fine, but old Figgy in the front garden, he looked like he was in trouble. So my brother and I do a little comparing and contrasting. We go and sort of have a feel around Figgy. And it turns out that Figgy looks like he's very loose. We can sort of push him around. He doesn't look like he's securely fastened to the ground. And my brother just pulls him straight out of the ground. Shallow root structure. He looks dry. He looks like he's dead. And so, we're obviously out in nature here, folks. We're trying to find lessons out in nature. And wouldn't it have been easy to just look at Figgy? He basically looks like he's dead. Wouldn't it have been easy to just say, isn't it dreadful? It's terrible. Figgy didn't make it. We'll just have to get a new tree, or a new flower, or a new something in the front garden. Figgy tried his best. He had 1 year where he yielded some figs, but that was it. Oh well, it's time to get rid of Figgy. Wouldn't it be easy, folks, to take a pessimistic, hopeless perspective when we would look at Figgy? Because really, folks, let's be honest. Figgy did look, and still does, look like he's dead. There really aren't that many signs of life. No leaves, no figs. He looks very brown and dry. And it would be easy to just cast Figgy aside and say, yeah, well, you know, you were good for a year, but you're dead. So let's just get rid of you. That would be very pessimistic, folks. And you know, where is it that we're going to extract a lesson from all of this? Well, you see, in the modern world, with everything that's going on, all the different things that you see on social media, all the news articles that you read, all of the segments on the BBC News and the ITV News and the Channel 4 News and Sky News and CNN and Fox News, you know, all of these pieces of media are constantly supplying us with what we're going to broadly call negativity. Negativity that's designed to make you pessimistic and give up on life. Designed to make you throw your arms up in the air and say, what's the point? Why bother trying anymore? The world is going to shit. World War III. In other words, folks, the modern world, with all its media and its bombardment of negativity, bombarding your brain with negativity, it can place you in a very hopeless state. You can feel like it's just hopeless, like it's all a waste of time, and this hopeless state can lead you, without you even realizing, because it's very insidious, folks. A lot of the time, you don't even realize that it's happening. But this hopelessness that the media, social media, the news, the newspapers, even other people who are consuming these things. This hopelessness, without you even realizing, can make you start looking at the world more pessimistically. There's this sort of a pessimism that infiltrates your mind, and you lose hope. Your optimism just drains away from your being, and you become this depressed, pessimistic, cynical, hopeless mess that has no purpose, no sense of direction, and consequently nothing of value to offer to the world. You don't see the world as a place to offer value, to which you can offer value, because you think it's just a rotting mess. It's just going to explode. Why would you want to offer value to such a thing? May as well just give up. This pessimism, folks, it's a dangerous thing if it's not kept in check. I'm not saying that you should just become a dipshit optimist, a dipshit who, you know, doesn't accept reality when it slaps you in the face. I'm not saying that at all. But you know, we did a few shows recently, particularly a live show on YouTube called The Power of Balance. And life is about balance, folks. It's not that you want to be 100% optimistic like a dipshit, and when life is literally trying to tell you something extremely important, you just say, it'll be all right. No bother. And then you get your head cut off. So we don't want a blind optimism. That would be out of balance in a different way. But at the same time, folks, the way the world is set up, with the social media landscape, with the news channels, with the written media, and with all the people who are consuming these forms of media, it's very easy to fall out of balance in the opposite direction. In other words, you allow this increasing amount of pessimism to infiltrate your mind, and it makes you feel hopeless. It makes you come out with statements like, what is the point? What are the good things in life? There are no good things in life. There's no point in trying. And you see, if you're not paying attention, folks, and you're allowing your mind to be contaminated by the negativity from the media landscape, and even from other people who are consuming content from the media landscape, before you know it, you're feeling this sense of hopelessness. And this hopelessness leads to the pessimism, which makes you give up on life. And so whenever you find yourself in a set of circumstances like the old Bandido here, the Bandido's mate, Figgy out in the front garden looks, for all intents and purposes, it looks like Figgy has passed on to the afterlife. And it would be so easy for me if I was just in this constant state of hopelessness. If I was just forever pessimistic, if I was out of balance, and I was 90% pessimistic and only 10% optimistic in the way that I look at the world, if this pessimism had basically engulfed my mind and my perspective on the world, then I would look at Figgy and I'd just throw him away. I'd just say, yeah, you know, you were supposed to give me figs. You gave me figs for a year. Fuck it. What's the point? The tree has died. World War III in the Middle East. Inflation. energy crisis on the horizon, food shortages on the horizon, the Palestinians are still getting the shit kicked out of them. You know, you could allow it all, folks, to put you in this very pessimistic, hopeless state. And then things in your own life, like, for example, when old Figgy here looks like he's passed on to the afterlife, you just cast him aside and say, nah, not going to do anything with him. Figgy the fig plant, Figgy the fig tree, nah, just throw him away. Because you're in this state where you're just so pessimistic, you're seeing everything through the lens of pessimism. You're seeing everything wrong with the world. Everything wrong with any given circumstance. Figgy's died. And then you just throw him away. You just discard him. And you think no more about it. Well, folks, let me tell you something interesting. Because I do not suffer from a perspective filled with pessimism or hopelessness. Very much the opposite. And I don't mean the opposite as in I'm a, dipshit optimist. There's a balanced way to look at the world, folks. And so, when I saw my mate Figgy in trouble, and in fact, if I was to be really critical in my analysis, it does look like Figgy has died. I'm not denying reality. It does look like my mate Figgy the tree has died. After only 1 year. 1 year! He only produced figs for 1 year, and he's now died. It does look that way. But you see, I'm not someone who loses hope easily. I'm not someone who becomes excessively pessimistic easily. And so, when I looked at Figgy in the front garden, and I looked at Ziggy in the backyard, Ziggy is clearly doing something that Figgy isn't. And instead of just discarding Figgy, my brother and I decided to conjure up a plan to try and see if we could breathe life into Figgy once again. So we went and got ourselves an ice pot. We put some brand new, nutritionally rich soil into the pot. We took Figgy, the dead-looking fig tree, put him into the pot with this nice fresh soil, nutrient-rich. We give him a little watering, and we moved him from the front garden into the back garden, and we placed him next to his sibling, Ziggy. It didn't take a whole bunch of excessive time and energy. And when you see the world, folks, through a more balanced lens, you're not excessively pessimistic. You don't view the world as hopeless. Isn't it funny how your own individual decisions start to look a little different? You know, doing what we did, my brother and I, what we did with Figgy, I mean, it's not going to change the world. We could have just thrown him away. Nah, he's dead. Figgy has died. Useless. You know, we could have just been very cynical, pessimistic, hopeless about Figgy's future and just thrown him away. But you see, because my brother and I, we are not blind optimists, but we're not also allowing the world to turn us into hopeless pessimists either. And so when we viewed this circumstance with Figgy, instead of just discarding Figgy, we looked at our mate with a certain hope. We had a hopeful outlook. And we basically asked ourselves, what have we got to lose by taking Figgy out of his original place, putting him into a nice pot with nice new soil, nutrient rich, moving him into the backyard where it's a little warmer. You know, there's a little microclimate in our backyard. The sun tends to hit our backyard when it's out for a greater portion of the day. So it tends to be warmer, there tends to be more sunshine. So we thought to ourselves, what have we got to lose by moving Figgy, who looks like he's dead, into a new pot with fresh soil, nutrient rich, give him a bit of water, and put him beside his sibling, Ziggy. And who knows, maybe some magical interaction and communication, maybe some substance, some pheromone will be released between the two fig plants. And maybe some magic will happen. I mean, folks, what have we got to lose? If Figgy doesn't come back to life, well, at least my brother and I can look ourselves in the mirror and say, well, we tried. We gave our best. We gave Figgy the very best shot at turning around this very dire-looking circumstance. We gave him the best shot that we could give him. And so we can then look at ourselves and say, well, you know what? That loop is closed. We gave our best to Figgy. We gave him the best shot, and we can feel proud in ourselves that we just didn't give up. We didn't just allow excessive pessimism and hopelessness to lead us to a decision that would have, you know, resulted in us discarding Figgy immediately. What have we got to lose by having a little bit of hope? Nothing. There's nothing to lose. In fact, there's everything to gain. Because what happens if Figgy comes back to life? What happens if Figgy gets a new lease of life? What happens if that initial location at the front garden, what happens if that initial location was just, oh, I don't know, some of the nutrients had leached out of the soil? Maybe there was some unexpected weathering that my brother and I overlooked. Who knows? And perhaps when we move Figgy to a new location that's a little warmer, with a bit more sunshine, beside his sibling, maybe something magical will happen. Because we have nothing to lose. If Figgy doesn't come back to life, well, as I've said, currently there doesn't look like there's much life with Figgy. So if he doesn't come back to life, we can at the very least, we can be proud of ourselves for not just succumbing to our pessimistic desires, succumbing to what the world wants you to succumb to, which is a hopeless state. It's almost, folks, like an act of rebellion. That's what it sort of is. You may be listening to this and thinking, holy fuck, all of this talk about your fig tree called Figgy. But you see, that's the thing, folks. When we really distill all this down, it's an act of rebellion. It's a rebellious act. Nobody knows, apart from now, of course, that my brother and I have done this. But you know what we're doing? We're actually actively practicing. We're actively practicing the art of finding hope in something. There is, folks, although it looks fairly hopeless that Figgy is going to come around, we should at least give him a chance. We should at least hold out hope until the evidence is so overwhelming that we must then update our biological computer, I say. Update our brain with the new information. But when you run, folks, a cost-benefit analysis, how much does it actually cost my brother and I to essentially give Figgy another chance? How much does it cost us to have a bit of hope? Nothing, really. And it's almost like an act of rebellion against this world that's trying to place us all in a hopeless, depressed, pessimistic, cynical, directionless, purposeless state. Because it's funny, folks, when you practice these things in your everyday life, and that's what this is. I'm under no illusions. Figgy, if we were to look at it from the perspective of probabilities, probably will die. But as Andy Dufresne said in The Shawshank Redemption, hope is a good thing, maybe even the best of things. And it doesn't cost my brother or I an awful lot of time or energy to literally hold out hope for Figgy. And by doing this, by engaging in this act, we are actively rebelling against this world that's trying to impose its hopelessness and its pessimism upon us. And by being active in this sense, we are practicing the power of balance. That's what this is, folks. There's a force that's acting on us all. This force that's coming from the media landscape. This force, this negative force. And it's like a big tidal wave. It's like a big tsunami. And it's just hitting us day after day. Well, if we're going to have this force of negativity be launched our direction, there's not much point in us all becoming more negative. We're just going to get swept up in the negativity then. We need to counter the negativity. This excessive negativity with its opposite, which is positivity and optimism. Not to the point where you're a deluded optimist, but to the point whereby, if you think of my right hand as the negativity pushing against us, we need to push back with our left hands. We need to push back against the negativity, the hopelessness, the pessimism. We need to push back with optimism, hope, positivity, not so that we become deluded, but so that we strike balance. I'm not saying that our optimism in our left hand should push us all this way. No, because now we're unbalanced in a different way. But if the negativity is pushing excessively this way, we need to find the center. Because at the moment, if the center is here, folks, right in line with my head, we could say that the negativity, the hopelessness that comes from the media landscape, it's pushed past the point of balance. It's going this way. And what we need to do, folks, is we need to actively push back. We need to push the negativity back. Not to the point whereby we become deluded optimists and we don't accept reality, but to the point whereby we are balanced. The power of balance, folks. We need to have the negativity, the positivity, the pessimism and the optimism sit in balance. And right now, folks, there are a whole bunch of people out of balance. They are in an unbalanced state. And by my brother and I doing what we did with Figgy the fig tree. It may sound silly. It may even sound childish. But what we are doing is, in our own lives, we are literally pushing back against the wave of negativity, the wave of hopelessness, the wave of pessimism. We can't save the world. My brother and I can't save the world. But we can definitely save our own worlds, our own lives. Each one of us lives in our own little world. Yes, we broadly live in this thing that we call planet Earth, or on this thing called planet Earth. But we all have our own little individualized lives and worlds that we live in. That's what my brother and I are doing by engaging in this act of hope, this act of optimism, by looking at Figgy, the dying or dead fig tree. And we're basically saying, you know what? We aren't going to allow the wave of negativity to allow us to just discard Figgy. We're not going to allow this to happen. We're going to push back. We're going to inject hope and optimism and positivity into our own lives, so that we, in our own lives, can bring our own life back into balance. I can't speak for you. I can't speak for anybody else. I can't save anyone else. I can only focus on me. My brother can only focus on himself. But engaging in these acts, folks, may sound silly. It may sound childish. But this is a way to counter what's being thrown our direction. The more hopeless you become, the more excessively negative you become, the more pessimistic, directionless, purposeless you become, the more likely it is that you're going to give up on life. The more likely it is that you are not going to try in life. And when you stop trying, folks, nobody is going to save you in this life. So when you stop trying, it is game over for you. Figgy the fig tree looks like it's dead. But I ain't going to fucking give up. I'm going to try. I am going to try my very best to bring life back into this fig tree. And you know what? If I fail, I don't care. Because this is not about the outcome, folks. It's about sending a message. Not to the world, to you. It's about sending a message to me in this case. And if you engage in similar acts, you're sending a message to yourself. Through this act of trying, through this act of not giving up, through this act of hope, we could say, I have hope that I can restore life into Figgy the fig tree. By engaging in this act, I'm rebelling against the negativity, the waves of negativity and hopelessness that are being thrown my direction. I'm going to find a way to get the balance right. I'm going to make sure I'm in balance. And what I do know, folks, is that the world is very heavy on the negative force, on the hopeless force, on the pessimistic force. It's out of balance, folks. So if something's out of balance, we need to get it back into balance again. And that's what the lesson is here. Start looking at things in your life, folks. They could be as simple as the example that I'm giving to you. this example of Figgy the fig tree, I could just give up on Figgy. I could just give up. Big deal. Nobody's going to know. It doesn't affect the world. It doesn't affect anybody else. It doesn't even affect me. Practically, in my life. I could just give up, discard Figgy, and just get on with the rest of my day. But the lesson here is, folks, you are being bombarded day after day with a force that we're going to call a negative force that's out of balance. And you are going to have to find a way, because nobody's going to do it for you. You're going to have to find a way to get that negative force back in balance. It's not that you're looking to eliminate it. Folks, there's a time and place for pessimism. There's a time and place for looking at a situation through a cold analytical lens. So it's not that we're trying to do away with pessimism, with objective critical analyses. We just want it in balance. And the world is trying to get you out of balance. Because when you're out of balance and you allow this negative force to run riot, you give up in life. And when you give up, you're truly fucked then. And because no one is going to come and save you, your life becomes hopeless. Truly hopeless. And the only person who loses out, folks, is you. You give up the gift of life. You literally give it up. Nobody forced you to give it up. You give it up. You gave it away. And so, folks, in your own life, it doesn't matter how simple the thing looks. Start practicing. Start practicing this idea. Whereby you give your best. You have hope. You look at the glass half full. Because you're being bombarded with so much negativity that more often than not, you have nothing to lose. Just like me with Figgy. When I run the cost-benefit analysis, I have basically nothing to lose. There's no cost to me being optimistic and having hope for Figgy. There's no cost. But there is not just, when we say a benefit, yeah, Figgy could come back to life and give me some figs. But it's not just about that, folks. The benefit is the sense of having tried, the sense of having given my best. The act of rebellion. It feels good to give your best. Even if it's for something like a fig tree. It feels good to know that you're not succumbing to the negativity. It felt good pushing back against it. I felt like after engaging in that act, and Figgy sits in the backyard now, in his own little pot, next to his sibling, Ziggy. And when I look at it, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like, yeah, I pushed back. I inched my way closer to a more balanced state. Figgy now symbolizes resistance. It symbolizes this rebellious act. And I take tremendous satisfaction from that. Because it proves to me that I have not yet given up in life. Far from it, folks. And if I'm willing to do this with a fig tree, think what I'd be willing to do for some other things. There's a force acting upon you, folks, and it's out of balance. It's what we're going to call a negative force. And for you to wrestle control back of your life, you need to start looking at things in your life through a different lens. You need to start, like Andy Dufresne says, having some hope as you look towards things in your life. Start trying. Don't give up. Just start trying to do things. And if you don't get the outcome that you were looking for, if you don't get the desired outcome, that's fine. It's not about the outcome. It's about the act of trying. It's about the act of having hope. It's about the act of being optimistic. It's about the act of essentially rebelling against the negative force that's becoming out of control and unbalanced. It's being thrown your direction. When you restore balance, folks, when you have the pessimism in its right percentage, let's say, and you have the optimism in its right percentage, in its right quantity, you're more balanced, folks. The more balanced you are, ultimately, the more accurate your decision making becomes. And that's good for you. And so, all that's left to say is, when Figgy dies, hope arrives. Figgy is the symbol of resistance, folks. Figgy is the symbol of balance. Figgy's going to be a reference point for the Bandido. Figgy will allow us to figure out how we can all rediscover our balance in this world, folks.